What if the UK became socialist? In this timeline, the 1926 United Kingdom general strike still breaks out but are not called off. Tensions would rise until a single soldier would accidentally fire a shot, killing a worker. The news would spread like wildfire, and just some time later the United Kingdom finds itself in a civil war, with socialists holding the urban areas and loyalists the rural ones. The royal family would be evacuated to Canada. After fierce fighting, the socialists managed to take over the nation by 1927 and proclaim the Union of Britain. The second former Entente member was now turned to socialism, and London and Moscow would form an alliance against capitalism. The leader of Britain would be Walter Citrine, and whereas the Soviet Union is a dictatorship of a vanguard party, the Union of Britain is a dictatorship by a vanguard trade union, namely the Trade Unions Congress, or TUC. The nation is basically syndicalist. While this happened, the once mighty British Empire collapsed. Scotland would declare independence, but was conquered again by the British, while Ireland became a republic and invaded Ulster. In the Americas, the French occupy the Caribbean until the British returned to their homeland but failed to take Belize as Guatemala invaded it. Venezuela took Essequibo, while the rest of Guyana fell to Dutch Suriname. Argentina took the Falkland Islands, or now Isles Malvinas, and the South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands. In Africa, France occupied Gambia, Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Nigeria as well, while Italy annexes Somaliland. South Africa and South Rhodesia become sovereign but still under the British monarchy and apartheid. While South Africa took over Botswana, South Rhodesia failed to take North Rhodesia and Nyasaland because of Portugal, which aimed to connect Angola and Mozambique. They were successful and took both colonies. The East African Federation, consisting of Uganda, Kenya, Tanganyika, and Zanzibar, and the Kingdom of Egypt declare independence, with Egypt also taking Sudan. Spain annexed Gibraltar, Italy annexed Malta, and France occupied Cyprus. The Hashemites in Iraq and Transjordan united into the Hashemite Arab Federation and invade Kuwait, which goes to Iraq, and Palestine, which goes to Jordan. Saudi Arabia took the Trucial States, Qatar, and Bahrain. Yemen took Aden, and Oman became independent. France also occupied British islands in the Indian Ocean like Ceylon. In India, Afghanistan took Pakistan, while Pakistan, India, Dravidia, and Burma became independent. The Dutch took North Borneo, and Japan established a vassal state in Malaysia. They also took over some British Pacific islands, and so, in order to preserve their sovereignty, New Zealand united with Australia into Australasia. Only Canada, South Africa, South Rhodesia, and Australasia are ruled by the British monarchy. Britain would slowly recover from the Civil War, but would have to build itself a new navy from scraps, as Canada took it all, giving them the biggest navy of the world. Germany still remilitarizes the Rhineland in 1936, annexes Austria and the Sudetenland in 1938, and Czechia and the Mamiland in 1939. On September 1, 1939, Germany invades Poland, starting the Second World War. They partition it with the Soviets. The Soviets then unsuccessfully attack Finland and annex the Baltics and Bessarabia. Meanwhile, Germany invades Denmark, Norway, the Benelux, and France. Canada was unable to do anything against Germany, as they and Australasia are far away from Germany, and South Africa doesn't border them because of Portugal. The Free French in Equatorial Africa would be crushed soon, followed by the Belgians in Congo. Italy managed to swiftly take over Egypt and turns it into a vassal. Without fighting the British, they also managed to defeat Greece. After the Soviet Union took Bessarabia, Hungary took northern Transylvania, and both Hungary and Romania joined the Axis. The Union of Britain has been neutral so far. In 1941, Germany still invades the Soviet Union, and the Union of Britain joins the war on the side of the Soviet Union. Just like in Otel, the Allies managed to defeat the Germans, but the change happens after the war. The Allies only managed to liberate South Italy, Corsica, Greece, and Albania. In 1949, Canada, USA, Iceland, Faroe Islands, Portugal, Spain, Free France, South Italy, and in 1952 Yugoslavia, Albania, Greece, Bulgaria, and Turkey would form NATO. The Union of Britain now controls France, North Italy, the Benelux, Denmark, Norway, and West Germany. They established the French Commune under Benoît Fracon of the CGT, The Italian People's Republic under Gaius Vittorio of the USI, Batavian Commune under Henrik Oosterhuis of the NVV, Danish People's Republic under Eiler Jensen of the LO, the Norwegian People's Republic under Elias Wallen of the NNF, and the German Socialist Republic under Rudolf Rocker of the FAUD. Britain would form the Fourth International, and they would have, just like the Soviets and Americans, a large nuclear stockpile. The Soviets still formed the Warsaw Pact with Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and East Germany. The Cold War breaks out with the so-called Anglo-Soviet split. When the war turned south for the Axis, the Arab Federation just quickly left, but kept Syria, and since Free France wasn't able to take it back, it was left. Cyprus would gain independence, but would later lose the north. French Africa would also gain independence, including those British colonies, and they are now only left with Corsica. There in the British overseas islands are occupied by the US until they return to their homeland. With the end of the war, Italy still lost Libya, Eritrea, and Somalia, but Portugal, Spain, and Belgium would unsuccessfully try to hold on to their colonies. Here Zimbabwe and Malawi speak Portuguese, and Gambia, Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Nigeria speak French. There is also, besides English, a sizable German-speaking group in East Africa due to Tanganyika. The Dutch monarchy is only in their colonies, and after the loss of Indonesia, they give their remaining subjects in the Caribbean equal rights to stay alive. In Argentina, Leopoldo Galtieri doesn't get deposed, as the Falklands War never happens, or at least gets deposed later. The Arab-Israeli wars never happen without the existence of Israel. Maybe somewhere else an Israeli state gets formed, for example in Crimea, as the Soviets did propose it, but it isn't really a state, but rather an SSR. This causes the monarchy in Egypt to remain, rather than get overthrown by Arab republicanism and Arab socialism. The monarchy in Iraq, Libya, Tunisia, and Yemen also stays around. The Arab Federation gradually federalizes. Without an invasion of Iran in 1941, Reza Pahlavi rules as a despot until his death. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi then becomes Shah, but since he is an absolutist, Mosaddegh doesn't become influential, and thus the 1953 Iranian coup doesn't take place. In 1978, the Iranian monarchy is still overthrown, but not by an explicitly anti-American one. Maybe a democratic republic takes over. The Iran-Iraq War doesn't happen, and also no Gulf Wars. The lack of a Gulf War means the US doesn't deploy forces in Saudi Arabia, which would anger Osama bin Laden greatly, and so maybe 9 May 11th not happen. While Pakistan holds Kashmir, maybe Sindh and Balochistan may become a topic of tension between Islamabad and New Delhi. After the Second World War, Australasia regained the islands Japan took following the British Civil War, while the rest was occupied by the United States. The Soviets still help Mao to win the Chinese Civil War, and the Korean and Vietnam War happen like in Otiel. In 1983, Walter Citrine dies, having been in power for over 50 years, making him by far the longest reigning dictator in world history. The Trade Union Congress elects Norman Willis as new chairman. Unlike Citrine, he was a liberal, and would usher in a time of reforms. The freedom of speech and freedom of press would be expanded greatly, and other trade unions not controlled by the TUC would be allowed to campaign for local and national syndicates. The TUC itself was dissolved into its affiliates. As part of his reforms, he moved closer to Washington, and the Cold War between the Fourth International and NATO would calm down. However, France and Italy are often topics of tension, but both of these would erode as Corsicans and Mezzogiornans are less and less enticed for reunification, as they fear that the North would rule over them. Maybe the Republic of Corsica and Kingdom of the Two Sicilies might officially separate themselves from their former homeland. As for their satellites, they too would get greater liberties, but would not be allowed to become independent or leave the International. In 1992, the first free elections, the GMB managed to be the largest crowd in the parliament, and John Edmunds became chairman. In 1991, the Soviet Union would collapse, and both the FI and NATO would try to expand into the East. Germany peacefully unifies with the West, and Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and the Baltics align themselves with London, whereas Romania and Poland with Washington. In 2014, Russia invades the Jewish Republic of Crimea and successfully manages to conquer it, albeit after a rather slowly progressing war. This terrified Ukraine, and they joined NATO soon thereafter. Both London and Washington condemned the invasion of Crimea, and for the second time a Cold War between London, Washington and Moscow emerges, but this time with Peking as a fourth player, as without a US hegemony China and Russia wouldn't become allies. In this timeline, Great Britain and most of Western and Northern Europe are socialist, but not communist, but rather syndicalist. Though it started of authoritarian, after the death of Citroën syndicalism would be rather libertarian and democratic. Rather than having a world divided by two, here it is divided by four, with the Union of Britain being one of the four great powers. If you liked the episode, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Goodbye.